There's a horse in my fucking house.
Yes, there is. I put it there. Okay,
You put a whole horse in my house?
Yes.
Johnny be good.
Welcome to the Bow Stretches Anonymous podcast. This is me, Gage, and the co-host Noah.
What's up?
I don't know why I wanted to do that voice. I
Yeah.
just really wanted to do that voice.
I should keep the intro clip where we were talking about it.
Dude,
Okay.
I don't know why that was so funny to me.
So we've got a few topics, Gage. Our website.
Fuck! I don't know.
What?
I fucking forgot something. Hold on. Where the fuck is... Oh, never mind. It's too far away.
You want to restart, Gage?
Fuck no. We already started.
Yeah. Okay. Works for me.
It's fucking
Okay.
important.
True. Okay.
There's a horse in my fucking house.
Yes, there is. I put it there. Okay.
You put a whole horse in my house?
Yes. What are you talking about? There's a horse in your house.
There's a horse in my house!
Well, that I understand. I understand, Gage. Okay, so we have a new website. It's just bsapodcast.com. You can listen to our podcast on there, or it'll redirect you to our other places where we have our podcast. Like on every platform.
Every.
Are you just gonna do ad libs for me, Gage?
Yes, sir.
All right, so
He said
have
so.
some- Oh yeah, okay. I was planning on asking you this question. We talked about it a little bit before. So, Gage, are you a tits or an ass man?
Neither.
Why? You're a dick man?
No. Fuck you.
You're a ball man?
Okay, so my definition of pretty is way different than everybody else.
Why is that?
I don't actually know why. It just is.
Well, it's not like if you find them pretty, Gage. It's just like, what do you prefer?
Like, I prefer like people to like look natural, so, like no makeup or just like
That's not the
what
question.
they actually look. I don't fucking know.
No, okay.
I've never tried to actually
Listen.
explain it.
It's not like relationship worthy. It's not like that. It's literally just.
Just look.
Do you just look? Do you like boobs or butt? Which one do you like over the other? That's all that matters right now.
It's like even for me.
Dude.
I would
But
say
if-
I'm more of a tits guy.
Okay, that's all I was asking. Oh my god. Okay, well, now that we got that out of the way.
That was all you wanted to ask.
Yeah, that was all I wanted to... Oh, how was your day, Gage?
How was my day? It's good. We went up to the lake for a while.
Ooh,
Saw some dead fish.
you want to tell them what happened, which is why we're recording this podcast so late?
Yeah, and we got pulled over on the way home for speeding. It's great.
They were going
It's the first-
55
it
to
was the-
45.
It was the first cop I had ever seen that was a left-handed shooter.
Did you ask him?
No, the cops will put their weapon on their
Oh, yeah. Okay.
dominant hand.
Okay, you know, I've gotten pulled over before, Gage. 3
Yeah,
times.
no shit.
Okay, well, one of them, the first time I've ever gotten pulled over for, my license plate light was not working, which simple fix, nothing crazy. And then I got pulled over for going 81 and a 55, nothing crazy. But yeah, what do you think about that, Gage?
You're a dumbass. That's what I think. About that.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Why the fuck did you think that was a good idea?
You don't, Gage. Shut the hell up. All right. Well, then you also had a topic that you specifically wanted to talk about, right?
Oh, the music thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I want to like go over like the nostalgic music from like our childhood, so like the late 2000s, early 2010s, and then like what our like current musical tastes and stuff are. Like what
Yeah.
made it what made music back then so good to us.
All right. Do you want to start this?
I went through like 3 phases when I was younger of what music I liked.
And that is?
And it was at first it was more like I think it would be determined as like pop music.
Pop.
This was
Yeah.
This was like the time
like the
when it
shit
was
you'd
like,
hear on the radio,
yeah, like the shit you'd hear on the radio. It was like, fuck, it was
like party rock and shit.
Yeah, party rock or like earlier Imagine
Or like
Dragons.
Bruno Mars shit.
There was some Maroon 5. Shit,
I know you're
there
a huge
was
Taylor Swift fan.
the country stuff, yeah.
Taylor Swift does country music?
Taylor, I said Taylor. Taylor Swift. Taylor Quiff. Taylor, Taylor Swift did country music for a time.
I gotta look that up. I did not know that.
Yeah, she did country music for a time. The only country song I could get behind that she did, what was the name of it?
Actually, Tim McGraw.
Nah,
Picture to Burn.
He's a good country artist.
Ours.
No.
15. I Knew You Were Trouble.
No, I think I've heard that song before, but I don't think I ever really cared for it.
Yeah, it's not like country or anything.
Yeah,
like that.
it was the "You Belong with Me." That was made in 2009. That was the only like.
Wait, that's
real
country?
I think I would say it would be.
Wow, I did not know that. The more you learn.
She went from country to pop.
Yeah.
It was when she went to pop. It wasn't horrible, but you know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I did not know that was country, to be honest. But, and then what was your other phases? Or did you say them all?
What was?
You said you had like three phases of music.
So it was like mostly pop at first. After pop, it went more country. So, I had some Luke Combs. I still kind of listen to it. It's mostly Luke Combs, Brett Young, like Luke Bryan and stuff like that. Some Florida Georgia Line, but it was like stuff like that.
Mhm.
And the third one was shit. What was the third one? The third one I was in like a rock, but it wasn't like rock from like the late 2000s, early 2010s. It was what was it? It was early 2000s, so like around the time I was born, in the late 1990s. And my prime example, and I still listen to them now, is Paramore, but it's more like a punk rock kind of thing. And I think Paramore is
you like punk rock?
Somewhat, like when it comes to like Green Day and stuff like that.
You like Nirvana?
Not really Nirvana,
really?
Green Day or anything like that. I think Paramore is about as close to punk rock as I get. And it was more songs like Ignorance, The Only Exception, and Pressure.
Yeah.
That were those like my favorite Paramore songs.
Mhm.
But I think Paramore is about usually as modern as I get.
As modern.
After that, it's not anything recent or in my lifetime.
Okay. Yeah. So I have really dude, when I was younger, because like, you obviously in your car with your parents and shit, so you basically listen to what they listen to. I listened to like pop shit that was out at the time because it was on the radio. A lot of country shit. Honestly, you'd be surprised though, because like basically all I listen to now is rap. So like, and my parents never really listened to that exactly. They did when they were younger, but like, you'd never think that you'd just switch from like pop and country, just fucking some gang shit, dog.
Yeah.
You like any rap artists?
I do not. I could never get into rap.
Really? Why not?
I just didn't like rap. It was the only thing I couldn't get into. Really.
But you've gotten into like everything but rap?
No, not really like hip hop, rap, stuff like that I could never get into.
Alright. So I think you also wanted to talk about this music shit, like the nostalgic part of it. Stuff like that.
I think the only thing that really made it nostalgic was like what we grew up with.
Yeah, definitely. Like, what's a nostalgic song that you can just think of off the top of your head?
That party rock anthem.
Yeah.
Like
That's
that
why
is
I
like
said
that's
that.
like
There's a few though. Like, dude, for some reason I'm like imagining Adele singing "Hello" and stuff.
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. You got anything else you wanted to say about like the music stuff or anything?
Um not really.
Damn. Going for. Okay. Let's see. What's some stuff we
There's
can?
like
What's that?
modern
Oh yeah,
music.
modern music.
Or not modern music. Like what music like we like now.
Mhm. So what
I
do you
already,
like now?
I already said most of what I listen to is older than me, obviously.
You said you before the podcast you listen to like 1940s, 1950s type
Yeah,
shit.
like when what I listen to is very dependent on my mood. So like when I'm trying to focus or something like that, it
Mhm.
might be rock, but it's not like hard rock. It's oh, it'd be like Nickelback or something like that.
Yeah, dude, Nickelback's
Like mid
OGs,
'90s
the
Nickelbacks,
goats.
early 2000s. Like Stand Together. Fuck, what was it? Occasionally, if I'm in a good mood, I'll play like dueling banjos or something like that.
What is there?
Um,
There's like Photograph that went fucking popular everywhere for like the meme and shit as well.
I have never actually heard that song.
You're joking. Oh
No,
my
I've
god.
heard like memes of it and then like short clips of it, but I've never actually heard that song.
Wow. That's actually
Yeah.
crazy to me. I can't
It's like
believe that.
it's like when I tell people I've never watched Star Trek.
Honestly, I've never watched it either. I've seen like clips of that, but I've never
Yeah.
watched it.
So when I listen to music or like I'm trying to like focus on something when I'm at work, or if I'm just like in a mood that's like it's not an explainable mood, or like I just want to relax, I will usually listen to three types. It's the same type of music generally, but it's all different in a way. Most of what I would listen to is Hylung, Wardrunner, or Scald, and that's it.
Mhm.
All of them are like very old. Their music styles are very old. Hylung is the only one that I know of that actually draws off of stuff that was like legitimately done back in the day. Like this is like the Bronze, Iron, and Viking ages. So this is
Yeah.
during the time of the Roman Empire and stuff like that. And I actually pre-ordered the deluxe edition of their new album.
Oh really?
And it came, last month it came in, and it's got like pictures from across Europe. It's got the lyrics.
How much money was that?
It was $45.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and I got all the lyrics, but they're all in like the old Norse and the Proto-Germanic languages, and it gives you like a little thing in the front of the book so you can translate it if you really want to. But you get this part that talks about like every song and like what was like the inspiration behind it.
Mhm.
And my two top favorite tracks on the new one are called Anawana and Tenet. And Tenet is actually a song that's 13 minutes long. Anawana, I think, is only... Yeah, it's only 5 minutes long. But Tenet is 13 minutes long. Now, when they release... Like, when they do concerts, because they're doing their first tour in North America right now.
Yeah.
When they tour, like, a full concert will be, like, just over an hour. But there's some of their songs are a few minutes. Some of them can range up to 14 to 15 minutes. And it's just astonishing. But, like, when it explains, like, the songs, like Anawana and Tenet, Anawana is, like, described as a spell because when they did it, they took them, the parts of the lyrics off of bractates, which are, like, golden coins and amulets and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So, and it like gives a description because they were predominantly made from Roman gold. And hold on. But Anawana was found on Roman gold, and it was actually Roman gold was given to the Northern Germanic people as peace money, because the Northern Germanics were made up of an extremely warrior-like culture.
Mm-hmm.
They were very good at fighting. It was actually the prime example for Germanics was the Battle of the Teutoburg
Yeah.
Forest, and the battle took place around 9 AD. So this was, I think, it was either 9 AD. What time? Yeah, 9 AD, and Roman forces would fight up in the north against the Germans, the native Germans at the time.
Yeah.
Well, at the time, Germany wasn't a thing, but there were the Germanic tribes, and they would constantly argue with each other and fight each other, which is why they were so easily walked all over by the Romans. Well, it was one of the. It's commonly seen as an important defeat against the Romans, one of the most important, because it was the triumphant period of expansion under Emperor Augustus, the first Roman emperor, who was also known as Octavian, who was I believe the adopted son of Julius Caesar. And the Romans were attempting to conquer Germania, and this battle basically ended that.
Yeah.
Basically, the Romans would fight in Germania. The tribes had united under a Germanic. What was it? He was Germanic, but his name was Arminius. He was held in Rome as a hostage because his father was the chieftain of the noblest house in the tribe of the Cherusci. There was a couple of people around, but what was it? The person who was leading the Battle of the Teutoburg for the Romans was, I'm gonna botch this, was Publius Quintus, I don't know, you know what I mean, Varus. Well, at the end of the battle, his adopted son,
Yeah.
was Arminius. They led the fight against, I think it was just 3 Roman legions, and each Roman legion, I believe, had, what was it? The Roman legion was about 5,200 soldiers plus 300 cavalrymen per legion. And that was towards the Roman Republic era. Once you got into the Empire, it was 5,600 soldiers and 200 auxiliaries.
Yeah.
There was 3 legions. There was about 15,000 men. Well, because Arminius was in the Roman military so long, he knew how the Romans would fight, and turning against the Romans and supporting the Germans, he practically slaughtered the Roman army, all 3 legions. And it practically ended Rome's, looks to go north.
Yeah.
And I think, what was the show? Because there was a show made about in the general time period, and I can't remember. It's actually really interesting because the show is actually spoke in German. It was made in Germany. But the Roman people that come through that are from in the Roman military will actually speak Roman Latin with the accent and stuff like that. So they'll speak actual Latin.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to hear the actual Latin be spoke. It was so weird. But even if you know German, you have to use the captions because really nobody understands Latin because nobody speaks it anymore. But I'm trying to remember what the name of the show was. But that was what the bractates that formed the Song of Anawana was made of. And it was really cool because they take these very distorted lyrics from almost 2,000 years ago and turn them into songs that are just they're overwhelming. If you put on headphones and play it just overwhelms your senses. It just has this, it's the more spiritual you are, the more it'll hit you.
Yeah, I get it.
But the song Tenet, the 13-minute song, is, you know what a palindrome is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically that. But what's interesting about this song is that it's based on one of the earliest datable two-dimensional palindromes, first found in Italy. And it was actually found in a city buried under the ashes from Mount Vesuvius when it erupted in 79 AD. And at that time, the Roman Empire had begun flourishing and stuff like that. What's actually, and highlighting is what they consider it interesting, the palindrome doesn't actually read forwards and backwards, but it
Yeah.
also reads vertically in both directions. So in any way you read it, it always ends up back at the same way. It's the same thing, just forwards, backwards, top, left, bottom, right,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But their music is not for everyone. It's very different. And when I first heard about it and listened to it, it was difficult to get into because it was so different than modern music because of the time period it's based off of. But the more you get into it and the more you listen to it and like learn of what they're saying and what they're talking about, the more like attached to it you can get. Now, when it comes to Skald and Wardruna, it's not so much accuracy, I believe. I don't know much about their music. It is good,
Yeah.
but I don't know like much about it. Some of their songs like based on the sagas from the Norse and stuff like that. Others are just songs. But it is definitely my top music right now is Heilung. And there is one artist. She's technically from England, but her name is I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but her name is Ivor. She did if anybody here has ever watched the Last Kingdom on Netflix.
Yeah,
Um,
I've watched that.
yeah, the woman singing in the intro and like occasionally that's her, and
Hmm.
she's like done a lot of independent music and stuff like that. She comes from these tiny islands far north off the coast of Scotland, I believe, and it's really interesting to listen to.
Ooh.
It's really nice.
I've got another interesting topic that I think you would definitely be interested in.
Okay.
You hear about China and India sending troops to Russia this morning?
I heard about it a few days ago. I'm honestly I'm not surprised the Russians are doing this
Hold up, Gage.
because I'm not surprised that the Russians decided to do this because Russia holds a superpower status with a large military and a large nuclear arsenal,
Hmm.
and it obviously what's going on in Ukraine must be humiliating for something of such a high um, standard, like based on their military.
Yeah.
Just as how Afghanistan was a massive blunder to American military supremacy
Hmm.
because it went so poorly so fast, and a lot of the foot soldiers who spent time in Afghanistan all said, this was going to happen, but nobody on that top of that ladder had said anything. And I believe that's one of the main reasons we face a recruiting crisis is because the military has been so politicized. Nobody wants to be a part of that. But
Yeah.
I believe, like, if you brought, because National Guard units are designed to serve their states. If National Guard units didn't have the ability to be brought into federal army service, I do believe state National Guard recruitment would definitely go up because you get the same military experience in a way.
Hmm.
But I believe like when people join the National Guard, it's like joining the army. Like you get the college, of course, but you also get to like serve your state specifically because the ideological difference between the left and the right in America is it's an extremely divisive topic, obviously.
Yeah.
And
No. No. We're not getting too much into that in
yeah,
this episode. At
yeah.
least it'll be a more in-depth
But
episode.
what when it comes to Russia, I'm not surprised they decided to hold them, but I'm surprised that India is involved in this because India it has taken a neutral stance mostly when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, but China and India do not have good relations at all. The relations practically are non-existent. I believe a few years ago they had actually placed troops on on each other's borders, and the fact that the Indian military is supposed to work with the Chinese military now, just so soon after that, is going to be a bit interesting. And when the whole thing started, I was actually very shocked. Russia and when Russia invaded Ukraine, I'm like, oh, Ukraine is so it's screwed. Like, because back in 2014, their military was in the same predicament Russia's is in now.
Mm-hmm.
But Russia's military blunders is not because of technology. Russia has a modern military, but corruption runs so deep into the Russian government and the Russian military that actually deploying and fighting effectively is extremely difficult for the Russian military, which I believe is why Ukraine is seeing so many successes and even launching counteroffensives in Kherson now.
Yeah,
which is very impressive.
I just wanted to bring that topic up because I knew you'd definitely have some interesting stuff to say about it.
But I'm honestly wondering how many soldiers is Russia putting into these training exercises, because the estimated losses for Russian soldiers is over 50,000 soldiers, and that's foot soldiers alone, not counting vehicle crews and stuff like that. But Russia has lost so much stuff to Ukraine in the 6 months they've been fighting. Granted, Ukraine has taken a lot of hard hits, but with Western support, they're actually launching counteroffensives. I believe they've already divided up who's helping rebuild what region.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that Ukraine is doing so well astonishes me, because they're doing so against a modern military that hasn't fought since they fought in Afghanistan. I believe it was back in the 80s and 90s before the Soviet Union fell. But Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine is interesting, because Ukraine, I don't believe, has gone to war since it became independent. Not properly gone to war. Of course, there was the fighting in what was the region called? The Donetsk region. But that wasn't like proper armies going toe to toe with each other like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And Ukraine is fighting back in a way I think because when we watch nations fight like this, like Armenia and Azerbaijan a year, 2, maybe 3 years ago, there were things we could learn from wars, even if America, China, and India, whatever, took no part in the fighting. We can still learn how modern wars are fought, because modern wars between two actual militaries do not occur very frequently. This is the first time one has occurred in a very long time. Now, it's usually like paramilitary groups going up against each other from different countries. But this is actually two armies going up against each other. What happened in Armenia and Azerbaijan was one side had drones, one had tanks. Well, the tanks didn't fare too well against the drones, which led me to the question, how effective are tanks now? Because we're seeing the same effect in Ukraine now. The Russian military had extremely effective advances from Crimea and Donetsk because it's open fields where tanks will excel. But after that, when they got towards cities, the stalwart defenders of Ukraine, and when we started giving them drones, we saw the Russians not only get stopped, but now they're getting pushed back. So it leads me back to the question, how effective are tanks nowadays? Because a well-trained team with anti-tank weapons can take out a tank in close-quarter combat. Yeah. But out on the open fields, drones can just take out scores of tanks. And scores of tanks require massive amounts of materials, both for the armor, the munitions, the oil, and fuel to run them. Tanks, to me, are not very useful anymore, except in a very few circumstances. But I would say tanks not very necessarily needed anymore, but like APCs and troop transports are. But if I was in control of an army, I would definitely put more effort into Air Force and infantry-based warfare, like having infantry equipped not only to fight other infantry, but also to fight armored vehicles and low-flying air vehicles, because from what I know, most of the times the Ukrainians have shot down Russian aircraft has been entirely using Stingers and Javelins, which are infantry-based weapons. So the infantryman is one of the most versatile weapons because it can target a massive number of things. They have targeted Russian warships using these weapons. They have targeted tanks using these weapons. They have taken down helicopters and jets with these weapons. The fact that the infantryman is slower, but because of the versatility with the same combat effectiveness, is extremely impressive. Because when America adopted the F-30, is adopting in the current process of adopting the F-35, that is a multi-role fighter. It is not designed to excel at anything specifically. It's designed to be okay and decent at everything, but not excel at everything. The F-22 is an air superiority fighter designed for air-to-air combat. America currently only fields less than 200 of them, and actually looked at buying more, but to start production on the F-22s would cost $50 billion to start production, not including the costs to actually build them and operate and maintain them. But we have equipment in our Air Force from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and that's because it's good. It works. And I don't care how old something is. If it's old and it still works, it still works.
Yeah.
And because the Ukrainian military is using trenches. They use trenches. They use the hit and run tactics from hundreds of years ago. And it still works. World Wars, like when people talk of World War III, I do not believe would be like 2. It's not going to be these massive navies, massive armies, because no one can actually produce that fast, not anymore. The industry just isn't around anymore. I mean, China can't do it because the bigger your army is, the more it costs to upkeep and the more resources it costs. There's 1 billion people living in China, and they're already experiencing rolling blackouts because they are not producing enough energy. So I do not believe warfare anymore would be based purely on actually physically fighting. There would be a lot of it, and it would be very destructive, but it wouldn't be World War II sized armies where it's like millions upon millions upon millions of soldiers per country. It would be more of a cyberspace kind of thing where it's trying to cripple the country through cyber warfare, shutting down infrastructure, the electrical grids, and stuff like that. Trying to destroy as much as possible without physically causing loss of life on your side. But the fact is that warfare has become so advanced. If 2 superpowers like this were actually to go toe-to-toe, we would have to devise new tactics to do so, because our militaries, especially the American and British ones, are designed for counterterrorism and are used to counterterrorism, not national army to national army setups. China hasn't gone to war since the Chinese Civil War, when the communists took power. So we actually, as far as I can tell, do not know how the Chinese would fight. I mean, of course they have a doctrine, but doctrines only apply under certain circumstances. But if superpowers were actually to go toe-to-toe, it would be... Oh, I'm trying to remember. He was a German officer of World War II. Heinz Guderian. In his, he wrote a book, and I had read part of it. And that's the one thing I think we should do, is we can learn tactics and ideas even from our enemies. Heinz Guderian is a very good example of that. I believe he was the one who devised Blitzkrieg, which saw massive effectiveness against the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa. It saw massive use in Poland, which went very well. France, which went very well. But when he wrote, what was the name of the book? I'm trying to remember what the book was. I believe it was... I don't remember what it was. But, he had identified... Well, yeah, his book was written in 1937. It's called Achtung Panzer. And it had detailed... Because tanks had just been coming around 20 years beforehand. It detailed how tanks, used right, could decimate enemy forces on the battlefield. Now, in 1937, this was all theoretical. There was no practical physical use of it. And when he had actually used it, it worked well in Poland, well in France. It worked well in Africa somewhat. I don't know how well it was used in Africa. And it was used well during Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union. So every time Germany used this blitzkrieg tactic, until the Allies found out how to counter it, they were beaten back most times. But I believe it was Heinz Guderian who had the quote. Give me a second. I want to make sure I have it right because I don't want a false quote. A second. Yeah, he spoke of new weapons require new tactics. Don't put new wine into old bottles. We would be applying this thing that Heinz Guderian brought up to modern warfare. We have new weapons to fight new people's weapons, and we haven't devised new tactics on using them. We're going to be using the old tactics with new equipment.
Yeah. And
it's in a World War scenario, assuming like it's just World Wars, no nukes are launched, it goes the way the Second World War did. It would be people are going to excel at stuff, but no one's going to know how anyone's actually going to act. Yeah. But the more they fight, the more they learn how they act and how to counteract certain things. It would just be... It's just unpredictable early on because everybody has all these brand new, super high-tech weapons to detect missiles or destroy something. Like Israel and I believe Ukraine possibly. Israel is working on developing a laser designed to take out drones, which is trying to replace its Iron Dome system. Because right now, the Iron Dome system uses, I believe it's just smaller missiles, smaller like ballistic missiles to intercept, the incoming missiles. Well, these lasers would be able to intercept the missiles at a way cheaper price. So now, if this works, they will have very cheap Iron Dome systems that can be put in even poor countries. I mean, Ukraine could afford it when the war's over, and it wouldn't have to worry as much about Russian missiles coming in again. Because obviously, the Russians are still sending missiles in. But with how often these new technologies are coming out, the tactics of employing them both defensively and offensively are being changed constantly. So even today, without international warfare on that scale is constantly changing. And it's I don't want to see it happen, but I can never help, when it's brought up, I can never help but wonder, with how much has changed, even in the last few years, how different would a World War III be 5-6 years ago compared to now, and then compared to 5 or 6 years later? How different would a war be in those three situations? Because warfare from World War I to World War II, because I believe there was only 20 some years. There was only 21 years or something like that between the two? Because World War I ended in 1918. Or 1919, technically. But, in that very small period of time for military technology in World War I and World War II, tactics had changed massively. I mean, the use of an air force rose massively in World War II, partially because planes had just been invented maybe a decade before World War I. But when this new technology came around, they were figuring out how to best apply it. And we saw, that change throughout World War I. Their tactics were constantly changing, trying to beat one side back out of its trench and take the next one. But in World War II, obviously, there wasn't much trenches in Europe because of what was going on. But Germany had changed its military so drastically, because they were the first to, I believe, to put radios in tanks so they could all communicate effectively. Infantry had tanks, or not tanks. That didn't make sense. The infantry had radios. The Air Force was ahead of its time because I believe the only two fighters that could effectively counter the German Bf 109s was the British Spitfire and Hurricane. But the British had thought it was going to be like World War I trench warfare, and it very quickly in 1941 was not that way because France surrendered very quickly. But when Britain found itself on itself, it only had the RAF fighters because, of course, Germany wanted to secure air dominance before ever actually invading for obvious reasons. Well, the RAF was constantly adapting its capabilities, both with its fighters, its pilots, and how it reacted. When the smaller raids would come through from Luftwaffe bombers, the RAF wouldn't really move to intercept it. Because if they moved to intercept it every single time, they'd be running out of fighters, pilots, ammunition, and fuel. They only really scrambled fighters for the big raids, which actually led them to winning the Battle of Britain, was the fact that they had reacted how they did, that they adapted their tactics and strategies to the Germans, because the Germans were a superior force at the time, Air Force wise, obviously, but the British had adapted their military to counter that most effectively, and it worked. And we're seeing that adaptation occur now in Ukraine and Russia, because Russia technologically has a much more powerful military than you. But the longer the war has gone on, obviously Ukraine was struggling very bad in the first month or two. But after a while, the Ukrainians figured out how the Russians were fighting and then established the best ways to counter it, and have now begun pushing the Russians back using those tactics. So the whole thing of adapting your tactics to fight a superior force is obviously working, because the Taliban and Al-Qaeda adapted their tactics to the American military, and I'm going to say they won because they took back the Taliban took back Afghanistan and came out on top. So it's not much how well your technology is put together, it's more how well your force can adapt to either an overwhelming force or just adapt in general to new threats. Because in every war, World War I, everybody was like, because there hadn't been a major war in Europe in, I believe, over 100 years. Because I think the last major wars were the Napoleonic Wars in the early 1800s. And everybody still had the ideas like using, like the blue uniforms of the French, not wearing helmets and stuff like that. They hadn't changed their military as much because there wasn't a need to change their military as much. So when World War I broke out, it was just everybody drastically testing new stuff. Because, I mean, technology had moved so massively from the early 1800s to World War I. And the adaptation of integrating technology into armies, because at the point it was mostly still just infantry. But now, when they adapted technology in, the dynamic of warfare changed. What with tanks being able to bust through lines, and fighters being able to bomb from, fighters and bombers being able to bomb from above, the dynamics of warfare changed dramatically. And even in the small local conflicts, you can still learn how to overpower more powerful people. And I think the fact that Ukraine has adapted itself so well to Russian attacks, much like Britain did to Nazi attacks back in the Second World War, goes to show that even through the ages of warfare and how much it has changed from the muskets of the American Revolution to the futuristic cyber warfare of now, there are still premises from the Revolution and even beforehand, back when matchlock muskets were a thing. And some even before that, where sword and shield was. Wessex, the main predecessor to England, which formed the British Empire, was a great show of this. When the Vikings were invading from Northumbria, which was south of Scotland, um, obviously the Saxons were not doing very well. Well, King Alfred the Great had drastically changed. He was taking more money from the church, which was very popular at the time because it was like this was the late 800s, early 900s, I believe, mid 800s. Um, Alfred had taken more money from the church and began building what he called boroughs, which were fortified settlements. Now, at the time, laying siege was very difficult because nobody could support an army that large because the Romans had been building armies like that, but when the Romans fell, there was this massive power gap. And the only people who really filled it was the Vikings of the North because they were the richest region at the time for much of the medieval period until much of the Vikings converted to Christianity towards the 1000 mark. Well, when it came down to Wessex fighting back, Vikings would tend to ransack settlements, take what they needed, and run away when it came to Wessex. With Wessex having all of its stuff fortified, and when they would harvest grain, they would take it into the fortifications. They were able to last in a siege much longer than the Vikings were, and the fact that having the boroughs allowed Wessex to gather its army, or its fjord at the time. Wessex didn't have a standing army. Most countries didn't. They have what are called fjord, which are basically militia in a way. It's like the farmers had like pitchforks, shields. They had to provide their own weapons and equipment. But Wessex had led many victories, even because Winchester was the capital originally. No one had the power to take London at the time. Well, when Winchester was sacked and captured by the Vikings early on, Alfred went and hid in the groves, the marshes, and called up his armies and met the Vikings at the Battle of Edington, and I believe it was what was it? I believe it was 878. Yes, it was around May of 878. It was a decisive battle between the Saxons and the Vikings, and it actually led to the Treaty of Wedmore later that year. And I believe it established what's called Danelaw, which was everything the Vikings controlled, which was partially Danelaw was interesting because it did not involve Wessex. Wessex wasn't in that. Now the Kingdom of Mercia, just to the north, I don't know how much of Mercia was actually held under Danelaw, but parts of Mercia were in Danelaw, and Mercia didn't adapt too well at first, and eventually Mercia was brought into Wessex, and by I believe it was the year 912. Because I did like a presentation on this in high school. It was trying to make sure the date is right. I believe it was 912. 927 the Kingdom of England was formed. And it merged, the multiple Saxon kingdoms, and it was actually the Kingdom of England until May of 1707 when it united with Scotland to form the Great Britain, and then it had Ireland in it, and all that. But the tactics that, if you really look at it, the tactics that King Alfred used back in the mid 800s can still be seen in modern warfare now, like almost 1200 years later. So, even like the premise behind how wars are fought changes mostly, and I think that the fact that we can still learn how to fight modern wars off of ancient and medieval wars is very interesting, because I think like when countries go to war and the war is over, sure, they learned, okay, maybe going to war is a bad thing, but we all know wars are going to happen. There's going to be more war. There will always be war as long as humans are around. We don't tend to learn what our weaknesses were during the war, what our strengths were, what our enemy's strengths were, and what our enemy's weaknesses were. That's why warfare never goes one way or another now, because nobody can actually outmatch each other, because nobody learns from how they could do better at war. Even America, because we knew, sure, we lost Afghanistan, but we're still playing it as if we won and did good. I could go around and ask a soldier, what was your opinion on how Afghanistan went? And it wouldn't be a positive opinion. So I think there is a big disconnect between military leadership in countries, the top level, like the generals, the admirals. I do believe there is a big disconnect between those higher ups and the common foot soldier. Because the foot soldiers are going to be the guys on the ground who are actually experiencing this and learning how they fight. And the generals and stuff will be down in bunkers and in a safe place where they can lead from like maps and stuff like that. But I believe the dynamic of warfare is constantly changing. And next time international armies go to war, I always have a profound interest in watching how they fight rather than why, because they always explain why they're fighting, and even if it's not necessarily true, but how they fight is always interesting, because sometimes they change it after a war, and sometimes they'll just keep what they had before and wonder why they keep losing. And I believe that's why America's been losing most of its wars since Vietnam. We haven't learned how to fight the tactics that were employed in Vietnam. Because the tactics that were employed in Vietnam were employed in Afghanistan, and they both wound up the same exact way. So America's military doesn't learn from it. I do believe, because warfare is so dynamic and changing so often, the next war will be interesting to see. It'll be horrible, obviously, but warfare changes, and the smallest wars, even wars between paramilitaries, you can learn something from and apply it to your national. There's always something to learn tactically from war, always, and not many people seem to be noticing. And that's why I honestly think warfare is so difficult. I mean, warfare is difficult, obviously, but within 3 months, Ukrainians found out how the Russians were fighting, quickly developed countermeasures, and the countermeasures are working so well, they're actually able to push the Russians back. Now, I heard the United States, had obviously helped the Ukrainians plan this, but actually, from what I heard, the Americans had told the Ukrainians, "Don't be so ambitious, only take this much." The Ukrainians are so confident, they're pushing back further than the Americans recommended it. But if it works, I mean, it works. Granted, Ukraine's army still doesn't match Russia's in any means. But as long as the Western countries keep shipping arms and people keep volunteering, I can see the Ukrainian military coming out on top, possibly even getting Crimea back, which I'm kind of hoping for. I hope the Ukrainians do get to stay free and stuff like that, because in 2014, they overthrew their government because their government was pro-Russian, and because the people were obviously pro-European, they still are. And the leader of Ukraine at the time was working on a trade deal to get into the European Union, or just a trade deal with the EU, and scrapped it at the last second, moving closer to Russia, which in 90 days led to full-blown bloody revolution. And they overthrew their government in 2014. In 2014, if Russia did what it's doing now, would have curb stomped Ukraine easily. But I do think Ukrainians are definitely, in my opinion, definitely a military to learn from. I mean, we're teaching them how to fight as an individual soldiers, but I think tactically and strategically, everyone could learn a thing or two.
Sweet.
I think that's where I'm gonna stop.
You kind of went off, Gage.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
30, 40 minutes.
I don't care. It was fun.
Yeah, you carried the episode, so I'll let you do the outro.
I don't even remember how to do the outro.
You just say stuff, Gage.
I've been saying stuff for 40 minutes.
Just say an outro.
Here, I'll let you. Come up with an outro. Come up with an outro.
Come up with an outro.
Okay.
Can be whatever.
I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this, because I haven't had a single drink or a single breath since then, since I started this. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, subscribe, because we're gonna be making more episodes. We're gonna be kicking these bitches out. We're still working on the military journal thing. We don't even have a name for it, but we hope to have it out
Within a few
maybe
months.
I want to shoot for November, because I want to have a lot of stories up and I want to have a lot of people involved. But if you would like to be involved in like that production, or you have topics you want to talk about us to talk about here, let us know. Like, and we'll talk about it maybe if it's
Yeah, if it's good.
appropriate. Yeah, if it's good. If it's good. But yeah, if you guys liked it, subscribe. I mean, we're on. What all are we on right now? What was it? It was
Spotify, Apple Music, what's it
yeah,
called?
Apple
Amazon
Music, Google.
Anchor, our website. You can listen to the podcast on the website.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be a few more platforms added soon. Google Podcasts, that's another one, and then there will be a few more as well soon. So, you got any last thing to say, Gage?
Nope.
All right, then we're gonna end it off there.